Hey Opositores, welcome to another video in this journey towards the Oposiciones exam. This time we're going to be talking about direct and indirect speech, and I think it's quite an easy topic, so I hope you enjoy it. In this topic, I'll be exploring the topic of direct and indirect speech. I will examine the different ways in which speech can be reported, including the use of reporting verbs and the position of the reporting clause. Additionally, I will explore the rules for punctuation in both direct and indirect speech, as well as the use of time and place references and the concept of voice in the reporting clause. Finally, I will look at free indirect speech and consider some practical applications for teaching and learning these concepts. Direct speech refers to a reporting technique that allows speakers exact words to be quoted within a text or speech. It involves the use of quotation marks to indicate the exact words spoken by the person being quoted. Original sentence, I am going to the shop. Direct speech, John said, I am going to the shop, and that should be in quotation marks. Indirect speech, also known as reported speech, is a technique used to report what someone has said without using their exact words. In indirect speech, the speaker's words are reported indirectly by changing the tense, pronouns, and some other parts of the original statement. When reporting in indirect speech, reporting verbs are used to introduce the reported speech. These verbs can include said, told, asked, inquired. These verbs help to indicate the source of the reported speech and provide context for the reader or listener. A reporting clause is the part of the sentence that introduces the reported speech and typically includes a reporting verb such as said or asked. For example, in the sentence, she said that she was tired, she said is the reporting clause. A reported clause is the part of the sentence that includes the reported speech itself, such as that she was tired. There are four main types of clauses that can be used to report indirect speech. A that clause. This type of clause is used to report a statement made by someone else. It typically begins with the word that and uses the appropriate tense and pronouns to indicate the speaker's original words. For example, I will come tomorrow in the original. In indirect speech, it would be she said that she would come tomorrow. A WH clause. This type of clause is used to report a WH question or exclamation made by someone else. The WH clause can begin with words like what, who, where, when, why, and how, and it also uses the appropriate tense and pronouns to indicate the speaker's original words. For example, where did you go? In direct speech, he asked where she had gone. A clause with if or whether. This type of clause is used to report a polar question made by someone else. It uses the appropriate tense and pronouns to indicate the speaker's original words. For example, are you coming with us? In direct speech, she asked him if he was coming with them. An infinite clause. This type of clause is used to report a directive made by someone else. It typically uses the infinitive form of the verb to indicate the action that the speaker was directed to take. For example, please bring me some water. In direct speech, he asked her to bring him some water. In all these types of clauses, the tense, pronouns, and some other parts of the original statement are changed to match the reporting context. It is important to note that indirect speech does not use the speech marks, but instead relies on the reporting verbs and appropriate clause types to indicate that it is a report of someone else's words. In addition to direct and indirect speech, there are other ways of reporting what someone has said or expressed. These methods involve summarizing or paraphrasing the content of the original statement, rather than directly quoting it. One common way of reporting what someone said is by using reporting nouns such as argument, comment, complaint, observation, or remark. These nouns help to summarize the main points of the speaker's statement without necessarily using their exact words. For example, in the original statement, I think that we should increase our marketing budget to reach more customers. With a reporting noun, it would be, her argument was that they should increase their marketing budget to reach more customers. Another way to report someone else's statement is by using adjectives such as certain, sure, grateful, or concerned to describe the speaker's feelings or attitudes towards what they said. For example, in the original statement, I am sure that this new strategy will bring us more sales. With reporting adjective, it would be, she seems certain that the new strategy would bring more sales. Say is the most commonly used reporting verb for direct speech, especially in the past tense, said. For indirect speech, say and tell are the most frequently used verbs, also in the past tense. Additionally, ask is often used to report questions or requests, as in, he asked me where I was going. Foreign learners of English often struggle with the differences between say and tell, because both verbs can be used to report speech, but they have different grammatical structures and usage patterns. The main difference between say and tell is that tell requires an object, either a pronoun or a noun, to complete its meaning, whereas say can be used without an object. For example, she said something is a grammatically complete sentence, but she told is not, because it is missing an object. Additionally, when say is used with a pronoun as its object, the particle to is required to complete the meaning. For example, he said to me that he was tired is correct, but he said me that he was tired is not correct. The confusion between say and tell often arises because in some languages there is only one verb that is used to report speech, regardless of whether an object is required or not. For example, in Spanish, decir. Additionally, there are some collocations like tell the truth or say hello. The choice of reporting verb is important because it can convey additional meaning beyond simply reporting speech. Different reporting verbs can be used to highlight the speaker's attitude or opinions towards the reported speech, or to create a certain tone or mood. For example, using verbs like confirm or assert can emphasize the speaker's confidence in the reported information, while verbs like suggest or hint can indicate uncertainty or a lack of directness. When reporting someone's exact words, the words are enclosed in quotation marks. If the reporting clause comes before the direct speech, it is separated by a comma. For example, she said, comma, I am going to the shop. If the reporting clause comes after the direct speech ends with a comma and the reporting clause begins with a capital letter. For example, I am going to the shop, comma, she said. A colon is used if the reporting verb is more emphatic, such as declare, announce, or state. For example, the president declared, colon, we will not back down. It is also important to know that when reporting a question or exclamation, the question mark or exclamation mark is retained inside the quotation. For example, will you be there? He asked. When reporting someone's words indirectly, the words are not enclosed in quotation marks. Instead, they are introduced by a reporting clause. When reporting a question, no question mark is used. For example, are you coming? Becomes, she asked if I was coming. In indirect speech, the reporting clause always precedes the reported clause. indirect speech, the position of the reporting clause can vary. The most common position is at the beginning of the sentence, such as she said, comma, I am tired. However, in literary texts, the reporting clause might come after the reported clause, such as I am tired, comma, she said. The choice of words order can also affect the formality of the speech. For example, placing the reporting clause at the beginning of the sentence is more formal than placing it at the end. When it comes to deictic expressions referring to time, place, or persons in a particular context, in reported speech, these deictic expressions need to be changed to reflect the new perspective of the speaker. Here we have a table with the original text and how it would look like in the reported version. For example, yesterday would become the day before, today, that day, tomorrow, the next or following day, next week, the following week, now, then, here, the, this, that, or these, those. Tense backshift is the change of tense that occurs when we report someone else's words or ideas. The backshifted tense will depend on the tense of the verb in the original sentence and the time relationship between the event described in the original sentence and the time of reporting. The tense that do not need to change for backshift are the past continuous, past perfect continuous, and the future tenses with will and going to. Backshift does not happen in the following cases. If a statement still holds true at the time of reporting, then there is no need for backshift. For example, he said he lives in London. This does not need to be backshifted because it is still true. If the reported speech contains a general truth, such as the earth orbits the sun, backshift is not necessary in this case. If the speaker is repeating something that they have just said, there is no need for backshift either. For example, person A, I am coming. Person B, what? Person A, I said that I am coming. Here we have a table in which we have the original text and then the reported version with the tense. For example, a tense in present simple in the original text would be he studies English, and the reported version in past simple, he studied English. Present continuous in the original text, she is studying for her exam. In the reported version, past continuous, she was studying for her exam. Past simple in the original text, he passed the exam. Past perfect simple in the reported version, he had passed the exam. In the original text, present perfect, they have visited New York. In the reported version, past perfect simple, they had visited New York. Modal verbs can change in reported speech to reflect a change in time and perspective. However, could, might, should, would, ought to, and used to do not change. So here we have another table with the modal verbs and how they do the backshift, and then how that would look in the original text and the reported version with some examples. The modal verb will becomes would. The original text, I will go to the party, becomes she said that she would go to the party. The modal verb shall could become either would or should, and we will see that with the examples. I shall not be late becomes he said that he wouldn't be late. Shall we go to the cinema becomes she asked if we should go to the cinema. The modal verb can becomes could. I can speak French fluently will be reported as they said that they could speak French fluently, or he or she said. The modal verb may becomes might. I may win the game. She said that she might win the game. The modal verb must could either become had to or must, and we will see it here with the examples. You must have a valid passport to travel abroad. He told me that I had to have a valid passport to travel abroad. I must study for the exam. He said that he must study for the exam. As you can see here, must in reported speech is must when the same person is saying that to themselves. In reported speech, pronouns usually change to reflect the new speaker's perspective. This means that first-person pronouns, I, me, my, mine, become third-person pronouns, he, she, they, etc. And second-person pronouns, you, your, yours, become third-person pronouns as well. For example, if someone says, I am going to the shop, in reported speech, it would become, he said he was going to the shop. Similarly, if I say, you need to do your homework, in reported speech, it would become, I told her she needed to do her homework. Two situations where the passive voice can be used in reported speech are: number one, when the focus is on the action rather than the doer. For example, it was reported that the building had been destroyed. Number two, when the speaker is unsure or unconcerned about the doer. For example, the necklace was stolen instead of someone stole the necklace. The passive voice is less commonly used in direct speech, as it can be more difficult to attribute the action to a specific person or entity. However, it can be used in complement clauses or reporting nouns to convey information in a more objective manner. For example, a teacher might say, one question I often get asked is, what is needed to pass the course? Free indirect speech is a literary technique where the narrator temporarily adopts the voice and perspective of a character, while still maintaining some degree of narrative distance. In other words, the narrator conveys a character's thoughts, feelings, and speech in a way that blends their own voice with that of the character. Here is an example of free indirect speech from James Joyce's Ulysses. Mr. Bloom stood in his way. I beg your pardon, he said. My name is Bloom, Henry Flower, and I am... Quite right, he interrupted. Any preliminary questions? Direct and indirect speech are two sides of the same coin when it comes to reporting what people say. Direct speech reproduces the exact words spoken by the speaker, making it a more objective way to report what was said. On the other hand, indirect speech involves the interpretation of the reporting speaker, making it more subjective. When using verbs other than say and tell for the reporting clause, such as urge, warn, or complain, the subjective point of view becomes even more apparent. The choice between direct and indirect speech also depends on the register and style of the text. Literary styles have their own way of conveying information, as seen in free direct and free indirect speech. These techniques were developed during the modernist period, as exemplified by James Joyce's work, to address the reader in a new way that transmits a different perspective of the world. Although reported speech is a grammar category, it has a clear communicative purpose. Depending on how it is used, it can elicit different reactions from the listener or reader. Backshift is an important aspect to consider when converting direct speech into indirect speech, as it helps to accurately reflect the change in time from the original utterance. Overall, direct and indirect speech are essential tools for writers to effectively and accurately report what people say and think in their writing. Now, I must say that I am going to use the first two paragraphs of this text for any grammar topic. We will then see what is specific about the topic of direct and indirect speech and how that will look in my teaching. As teachers of English as a second language to students aged 12 to 18, we should consider the didactic implications of teaching grammar in our class. Unit 1 focuses on the didactic aspects of teaching English as a second language, and Unit 12 covers grammar and how to teach it. In the 21st century, we need to adopt a student-centered approach to teaching, which emphasizes active and collaborative learning. Neurological research shows that grammar is better learned in an inductive way, starting with observations, moving on to pattern recognition, and finally applying the rules. The traditional deductive approach of the grammar translation method has been criticized by many scholars as insufficient. The new Spanish education law, LOMLOE, also emphasizes the use of active methodologies that go beyond the traditional methods. By adopting new teaching methods and approaches, we can better help our students learn English and develop the communicative skills. Lexicogrammar approaches assume that the traditional division between grammar and vocabulary does not account for the interaction of the two. For example, the fact that to know what a word or phrase means also requires you to know how the word or phrase behaves grammatically. Comprehensible input remains crucial, but the emphasis is on exposing learners to multiple occurrences of chunks through a range of techniques: reading aloud, translation, narrow listening and reading, communicative exchanges and transcriptions. Grammar rules are taught concisely and at a later part of the process, but do not form the organizational of the syllabus. EPI, Extensive Processing Instruction, is a method created by Gianfranco Conti, which has become very popular in recent years in the UK and Australia. Dr. Conti argues that grammar is not an abstract set of rules, but rather a tool that helps us make sense of language and communicate effectively. According to Dr. Conti, grammar instruction should focus on form, function, and meaning, and should be contextualized and meaningful to learners. In order to teach students aged 12 to 18 in Madrid about this particular topic, I would use a range of activities divided into three main categories: projects or PBL, extensive processing instruction activities using sentence builders, and real materials or authentic materials. Here we have some examples of projects that we could use. Number 1, create a news broadcast. In this project, students work in small groups to create a news broadcast that reports on a real or fictional event. The broadcast should include interviews with witnesses or participants that use both direct and indirect speech. Students will need to research and plan their reports, as well as practice the interviewing skills and reporting skills. They can also use technology to film and edit the broadcast. Number 2, conduct a mock trial. In this project, students will simulate a court case that involves witnesses who need to report on what they saw or heard using direct and indirect speech. Students will need to research and prepare their cases, as well as practice their courtroom skills such as questioning and cross-examination. They can also use technology to record and analyze their performances. In order to use extensive processing instruction activities, we first need to design our sentence builders, organizing the learning in chunks and selecting the information that we want our students to learn. Ideally, we would mix direct and indirect speech in our sentence builders. Here are some activities. Narrow reading. Provide students with a series of short texts that feature examples of direct and indirect speech. Ask them to identify the type of speech used and then use the sentence builder to create similar sentences. Narrow translation. Provide students with a series of sentences that feature examples of direct and indirect speech in English and the native language, but with gaps on both sides. This exercise is fantastic to make sure that they can do direct and inverse translations at the same time. Find someone who game. Give students a list of prompts within a table that requires them to use reported speech to gather evidence of what their classmates are saying. For example, in the table we can see, find someone who has been to France, and we write as evidence, Javi said that he had been to France. Find someone who has played in a sports competition, and we write there in the table, Valentina said that she had participated in a football competition, for example. Students then use the sentence builder to create similar new prompts for each other at the bottom of that page. Here is how I would use some real materials in class. I would ask the students to identify the type of speech used and look for common patterns in reported or indirect speech after exploiting the text with comprehension activities. I will then use the texts as models for them to produce similar texts at a further stage. These are some examples of authentic materials I could use. News articles, in particular those that include interviews or describe crimes, dialogues from movies or TV shows, series of emails or text messages that feature examples of direct and indirect speech. I have used the same bibliography for all grammar topics, as they ask for 2 sources, and it will be really difficult to learn more authors and books by heart. I have used Huddlestone's A Student's Introduction to English Grammar in the 2022 version, which is the new edition. Very, very new. I hope that impresses the person marking it. And the other book is Downing's English Grammar, a university course of 2006 edition. Thank you for watching another video, Oposiciones. I have found this topic in particular quite easy compared to others. What do you think? I hope to see a ball with that number 30 on it the day of the exam, to be honest. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, leave your comments, and in general, anything that you think would help us feel that we are part of a community that supports each other for this challenging exam. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.